This is an interview with Susan Sreter, name at birth Lang. The interviewer is Marion Weisberg. The interview is being held in Lawrence, New York, in the United States of America, and in the English language. Okay, I'm Marion Weisberg, and I'm interviewing Susan Sreter. Today is November 20th, 1995, and this is a Show Foundation interview. Okay. Your name?
My name is Susan Sreter.
And your name at birth?
I was born as Susan Lang.
And your date of birth?
Is August 6, 1921.
And that makes you how old?
74.
And what city and country were you born in?
I was born in Budapest, Hungary.
So you were born in 1921. And who was in your family?
I was an only child, and my father and mother gave me as much love as any Jewish parents could give. And they couldn't have more children, and my father always emphasized that I have to be very, very good and excel myself because I am his only one and because I'm Jewish.
So your parents gave you a lot of love and some very strong information, some very strong directions about your Jewishness, clearly
Right.
from very, very young age.
They sent me to Jewish schools all my life, in elementary school, and after gymnasium was also the only Jewish gymnasium in Hungary.
So in your family of origin lived your parents and yourself in the household?
Yes.
And what kind of rituals and structure did you have around your Jewish life at home? What do you recall?
Yes, I remember the Friday nights where my mother started to bake early in the morning, and my father in the evening said, "Dorale, that was the best halle what you made." Every time was the best, whatever my mother made. And on Saturday, Shabbat, we went to visit my father's sisters. They lived far away from where we had our home, but it was like a ritual. My father was a very devoted brother, and he was the only member in the man member in the family, and the sisters were widowed, and he made it sure that everybody was comfortable. He lost his parents at early age, so I hardly remembered them, but we were very close with his sister. We went Saturday to visit them, or nice, when it was nice weather, we met them in the park, beautiful park. Otherwise, we went to their house, and they were waiting for us and kissing me. And one aunt had a son. I was very close to him.
So he was like a family,
They
close
were
family members. And the family gathered together on the holidays?
Well, yes, my grandparents lived in the same building. It was a large business house together with two apartments, and one apartment we lived, and in the other apartment my grandparents with their 4 sons and 1 daughter. And it was like one big family.
Your father's occupation was?
He was a metal merchant, and he was partner with my grandfather. When he married my mother, he went to work for my grandfather.
So that this was a family business?
It was a family business, and the uncles, when they grew, my mother was the oldest out of 6 children, and when the uncles grew up, they all stayed in the business. Everybody had their own work. One was traveling for the business, and the other was like a salesman in Budapest, and my third uncle was a lawyer, and he was taking to the legal department of the business, and my father was the head of the business. He was very calm and he could speak to the bankers and to the buyers. And
your father's name, incidentally,
Ignaz.
was Ignaz, and your mother's name
Dora.
was Dora. And in respect to the community that you lived in, did you live among Jewish people, or were you living?
No, the business house where we lived was not in a Jewish neighborhood, and but my father made it sure that he founded a synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue, close where we lived, and it was Tompa utca synagogue. And he chose a young rabbi. He was the head of the synagogue until we were going for hiding.
So that your father was very connected to creating.
He was very active
community.
in the community life, and every Friday and Saturday we had poor people in the house for dinner or for lunch. And he taught me to give poor people more respect than to the rich people. And he was just a wonderful father. He was my hero. And I loved him. And him and my mother, they were wonderful. The perfect marriage. Everybody could just imagine.
So that you had a very strong
Yes.
love in the house. And
although I did not have any sisters or brothers, I had my mother's girlfriend children to play with sometimes, but I didn't feel needed. I didn't feel that I need more children because I was so happy with my family, and my uncles were my brothers, my big brothers. Every day they would come into the business after they got married. They were still bringing me chocolate and candy, and I was their favorite.
do you recall at that period of time in your life what it was like to be a Jewish child outside of the family, which was close bonded?
Yes.
When you left the family, what was that like for you among the non-Jewish population?
Well, I was trained not to speak to anyone on the street. Many times when I walked out from our house, they screamed at me, dirty Jew, stinky Jew, and I had to listen to that, and I was very upset. And but I got used to it. That's the way we have to live now, till one day everything will be all right. And I trust that when I was small, I trust that my father, he would take care of everything. He will do everything we need to do, and he will be all right. We were very optimistic.
What did your parents say to you about anti-Semitism? When you
That
talked
they
to
are
them?
bad people, and we shouldn't even, we should just neglect them. It will go away, because we are Hungarians, and our forefathers were in the war. My father was in the 1918 till the First World War, and he was telling me stories how he survived that. And the Hungarian government knew that we were always loyal citizens, and it couldn't happen. Nothing could happen to us. We went to Hungarian school, we were educated in Hungarian, and When I was a small girl, I remember we went for a holiday to Czechoslovakia. There was a little boy in that family and said that, what are you talking, the Hungarians, they barbars. And look at here, we have, everything is good here. And why don't you come and live with us? It's democracy, and you have just Horthy who doesn't like the Jews. And I argued with him, yeah. I was about 6, 7 years old. I remember arguing with him.
What did you say?
I said that we were educated in Hungary, and everybody speaks Hungarian. We are loyal, and my father fought in the war. They wouldn't do anything to us.
So that there was a sense of security about your survival
Yes,
at that
beginning.
time. Now, in regard to your practice of your faith, as a child, what do you remember about living your life as a Jewish girl? And that includes such things as schooling, as belonging to organizations which had an orientation toward Jewish life.
Yes, I went to the Jewish school, and everybody was Jewish in the class, and I felt very close to them. Even today, with some of the girls, I keep in contact because they were Jewish, and we were saved in the school. I loved that school, and we felt secure there. And we talked about the politics, and we went to the theater together, to the opera, and we tried to do everything with ourselves. I never had a Gentile friend that period of my life, and we were so very close to them. And we went, they had a Jewish organization, Watts was the name, and we had gym there, and we went swimming together. And as a young girl, I didn't socialize too much, but sometimes they had dinner dances or afternoon dances with a lecture together. We went there, but always one of my uncle, who was the youngest, came as a chaperone. When I wanted to go somewhere and my parents wouldn't let me go alone, I would say to him, Uncle Imre, would you come with me? And he came. He taught me how to dance. I didn't go to dance in school. My parents were Orthodox, and they didn't think it's proper.
And you were Orthodox as well then?
Yes.
You thought of yourself as...
Yes, definitely. Later on in the school, in the gymnasium, there were very few Orthodox girls.
How did that affect you then?
Well, I would have liked my father to be more relaxed about it, but I liked him so much. I did everything just to please him. And my mother was more relaxed, and she was like, if I wanted to go somewhere Saturday later on with my friends, she said, okay, go. And she knew that I wouldn't go on a train or anything I wouldn't do, but it's not proper. And I said to my father that I don't believe in that strict. I was a little bit rebellious. And that wasn't any problem about
so that. The way you're describing your experiences in your community and in regard to how you were practicing seemed to be very rich and full of people.
It was.
Life.
It was. And we lived, we went to concert a lot, and opera, and holidays.
Let's go up to around the beginning then of the war, certainly in regard to your living in Budapest. and what you were hearing about the war starting in about 1937, 1938.
1937 already started to be dark days.
Why did you say dark days?
Because the newspapers constantly wrote about the Jewish problem, as they said it. It was a problem to have Jews in the country. And they wanted to limit them in business, and the propaganda was terrible.
What do you recall about the propaganda?
They showed in the paper Jewish ladies, they were all dressed up with furs, and the man in tuxedo going out for the evening, and next to it was always a poor person who had a cross in his neck, showing that the Jews are just for luxury and the Gentiles have to work for them. And day by day they were atrocities, and then it came the numerus nullus on the universities.
When do you recall the beginning of racial laws against Jews? And what do you recall about that, or what did you notice?
In the newspapers, and that we started to finish the gymnasium 8 years of classes, and we knew we cannot go to the university.
How did that affect you, knowing if you couldn't go to the university?
Well, I said to myself, well, we'll wait after the war, we'll go if we really want to. And meantime, we got ready for life. And my father said after the graduation in gymnasium, you have to learn a trade like every Jewish girl should. So I went and I started to learn how to sew. And I was working in that, and then my father opened up a small workshop with manufacturing materials for rubber corsets, and I managed this for a short while, and then I met my husband, and
We're already now at what was the war actively in other countries.
Yes.
In Hungary, if we can go back a bit, say to 1938 or 1939, do you have some recollection as the war was growing in proportion in the rest of Europe, how that
well, I remember my mother had relatives who were Polish originally, and they were taken away, and we didn't know where. Just one day they came and they put the whole family on a truck.
Who came?
From the police station. And they were taken away, and my mother then found out, and we tried to pay somebody under the table. We gave them lots of money. They knew where they were taken, in a concentration camp.
Which relatives were these?
That was my grandfather's sister, with husband and 6 children. In one day they were taken away. The only survivor was one member who was in the army then, and the other member was a very lovely young woman who my mother arranged, and she went out to Australia, and later on she sent us the papers to follow her.
So this was your great aunt's
daughter,
and they were deported to Poland?
My grandfather 1900 came with my grandmother to Budapest from Poland. They were escaping from the pogrom, and they stayed in Hungary.
And then they were forced back to Poland?
No, they stayed from 1900, they were staying in Budapest. But the sister, who was also in Budapest, in 1938 was taken from Budapest because they were Polish origin and they didn't have the Hungarian citizenship paper. Therefore, one day the police came and took away the whole family. Just these two members was saved.
And how did this inform you?
So my mother, when she heard it, she paid for someone to bring them back. But the person just took the money away, and we never heard anything anymore about them. They were
Had you
killed.
any information about the kind of atrocities
That was one, and then the constant propaganda.
In any of the information that you had through the newspapers or by speaking with anybody, did you have any information at all about what after 1939
was coming to?
Yes.
No.
None.
We didn't think about it. We were sure that it couldn't happen to us. We heard about Poland and the Polish Jews, that they were taken away, but we kept on saying it cannot happen in Hungary. So we didn't know. We didn't want to know, maybe. And in the school, everybody was optimistic. I remember one day when Chamberlain went to meet Hitler. And in the class, we were listening and watching the radio, and then they said that they made peace. And we were like happy and celebrating that day, that war is nowhere close to us.
Would this have been then in 1938?
It was 38.
Mm-hmm. So that was the idea that at least at that time it seemed as though there would not be a war, there wouldn't be an invasion.
That's right, we were optimistic. Mussolini came to Budapest and the whole class went to say hello to him on the big plaza of Budapest. And we had to shout, "Viva Mussolini, viva Mussolini, viva Edna," that was his wife. And inside of us, we were thinking the opposite.
What did you think?
That he should drop that.
So you then recall that at that time there was the false idea that the war would not...
That everything will be all right. We started to find out. And 39 summer, my father was taken away to a labor camp.
Now, how did that happen?
Suddenly they said all Jewish men under 60 has to go and give time for the Hungarian army and help them to build roads. And they took him away, but luckily after 3 weeks my mother was able to get the connection, and he complained, my father complained that he doesn't feel good, and with the doctor help we brought him back. So already the whole summer was very disturbed. We cancelled our vacation, and I felt sometimes that it's the bad clouds are coming over our head, and maybe I will never get married, maybe I never have family. And that time every young girl dream was the big wedding and live happily ever after.
So when you started to think about marriage and the future, one quest was for a husband and a family life of your own.
Yes, and very few Jewish boys were around. They were they were taken away in 38, 39. They were already in the army and taken out from the country to Russia, to Germany, and it was very disturbing.
What did your father tell you about his experience when he returned?
Well, we were so happy to see him, and he was telling us the anti-Semite how they were cruel to them. They had to dig, and they didn't take consideration that he wasn't that young, and they were just cruel circumstances, squalid lifestyle.
Did he have a position about it, the fact that he had been...
No, he wasn't. They didn't give him army clothes. They had to be in civil clothes, and just had an armband, a yellow armband, which showed that he was Jewish.
So at that time, he was in a brigade or a group of forced laborers.
Yes.
And fortunately, after 3 weeks...
3 weeks with connection and
with
money.
Connection.
And
how is it possible to
to
really
get
draw him
connection.
back and get connections? Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I guess I never knew how they got the connection. I was just taking it for granted. My father is very smart. He knows how to get it, and was a big family. Constantly they had conferences. I loved to listen them, but most of the time they wouldn't let us in. Just my poor uncle and my father was in the office and
your
talking
uncles
of.
were not conscripted into forced labor?
Yes,
They
they also, but they were then, after it happened to my father, they started to think about it, and they went to the doctors and they complained that they disturbed and psychomatic, and the doctor put them in mental hospitals. So that was very good for that point of view. Although one of my uncle complained they gave him shock treatment, and but he said it's better because he got a certificate that his mental case. So he was hoping that he can use for later on if they want him into the army.
How old were your uncles then?
My uncles were like maybe 40.
So that they
40,
did
between
manage
30 and
in
40.
one way
My
or
mother,
another to not be drafted into forced labor.
for the time being.
For the time being. So
Yes,
there's more
they
about
were,
this later.
Yes, they said we just think about today. Tomorrow we'll see what we can do for tomorrow.
So when your father came back, the family went on with life as usual, let's say, that meaning that back to work and to continue to...
Yes, they were limited, like big firms who were not Jewish. They stopped giving them orders, or they couldn't work with everybody.
We'll get to that then next.
Yes.
This is November 20th, 1995, and an interview with Susan Sreter, and the interview